Hello and welcome. You guys up for another challenge? I know I am. Now that we're done talking about loops, let's apply them. Let's try to figure out how to solve a problem. So in this challenge, you're going to create a guess the number C program. It's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be a little game. What's going to happen is your program is going to generate a random number from 0 to 20. After you've generated that random number, you're going to ask the user to guess what it is. So the user should only be able to enter numbers from 0 to 20. If they try to guess like the number 50, you're going to display an error and say, hey, you can only enter numbers from 0 to 20. So that's one stipulation. But once the user actually gets a guess and it's a valid guess, you're then going to tell the user whether or not they were high, or too low. Or if they were correct, you'll display saying that they're correct and they will win the game. Now they only have a certain number of times that they can guess the correct number. They can only guess the number 5 times. After 5 times, they lose the game. So this game is all about guessing the correct number. Any number from 0 to 20, you want to validate the input from the user to make sure they entered for 0 from 20. And if they entered something and they have less than 5 tries, you're going to tell them, hey, this was too high, or hey, this was too low than the number that they're supposed to guess. And those are the basic requirements of the program. A basic guess your number type game. Now, what's the output look like? To give you an idea of how I designed it, you may want to follow this. When I first started the program, I displayed a little message. I said, this is a guessing game, just so they know what's going on. I then told them, I have chosen a number between 0 and 20, which you must guess. You have 5 tries left to guess. I then said, enter a guess. They were supposed to enter their guess. They entered 12, and I printed out, sorry, 12 is wrong. My number is less than that. And then I displayed, you have 4 tries left. Then they entered a guess of 8, and I said, well, 8's wrong too. My number is less than that. And then they entered 3. I said, or they had 3 tries left. They entered 4. I said 4 is wrong. And then they had 2 tries left, and they finally guessed my number, which was 2. Once they guessed the correct number, I told them, congratulations, you guessed it. So they won the game because they still had 2 tries left. It's a basic type of simple game where you're going to need to use if statements, you're going to need to use while loops. So you're going to need to use a loop in this because you have to keep asking for input until the user guessed correctly or until the number of tries was over 5. So one of the best ways to start a program like this is to write down how you're going to create the program on paper. And I would suggest you do that because if you write down how you're going to attack the problem on paper, it's going to be easier to solve. And you can write it out in pseudocode, so it's just English language, but you want to identify where you're going to have the loops and where you're going to have the if statements to check for conditions. Because if you look at this output, there's many conditions that you have to check for. Right? The while loop is going to check for conditions, or the for loop, it's going to check to make sure that it exits the loop if you guess correctly or if you're higher than 5 for tries. You're going to have conditions to also validate what they entered. So you're going to have an if statement to say, hey, you just entered a number. And if it's not between 0 and 20, and that may be, you also may want to have a nested loop for that case. Right? Because you want to keep asking them to enter another number until they enter a valid number. Not the correct number that you guessed, but a valid number. So I could see for this program an outer loop. The outer loop would be the loop that asks the user to enter numbers until they have successfully guessed the correct number or until they have succeeded their number of tries. I could see an inner loop where it asks if the number is not valid between 0 and 20, they keep asking the user to enter a valid number. And then I can see if statements to basically check whether or not the number is too low, too high, or equal. You could also, because you have multiple exit conditions for your outer loop, whether or not you guess correctly or whether or not the number is equal, that may be a good case for using a break statement. Because remember, you use the break statement when you have multiple exits. And so you could have something inside your outer loop that says, if they guess correctly, jump out. And then the condition in the while outer loop itself, in the while loop or the for loop itself, the condition to exit would be whether or not the number of tries is greater than 5. So that's one design approach. I mentioned many things. The only thing left, you have everything at your disposal. If you learned everything I mentioned, except this random number generator. This is new. You know how to do if statements. You know how to do loops. You know how to declare variables. You know all these nice things. You know how to print output to the display, but you don't know how to do a random number generator. So I'm going to give you the code for that. You need to generate a random number because each time you run the program, you want to have a new number that they can guess. So to generate a random number from 0 to 20, these are the steps that you have to follow. First, you have to include 2 additional libraries, the standard lib.h, time.h. So you want to add these include directives at the top of your file. Standard lib.h will allow you to use the srand function, which allows you to generate random numbers. Time.h allows you to provide the seed for the random number using the time, getting the current time. So when we include additional libraries outside of our program, it just means we want to perform some additional functionality. We haven't talked about all the standard libraries that C comes with, but they come with 2 nice ones to get the current time and also to generate a random number that we're going to use. So we include those first 2 directives at the top. Then we're going to create a variable inside of our main function called time_t, and you can just name it t. You add that. Once you add your time variable, you can initialize your random number generator using the srand function. So what you do is you say srand. This provides a seed to the random generator. It's just used to initialize it. And here you just copy this line of code, srand, parentheses, unsigned, right parentheses, and then time, and then you pass an ampersand t. Don't even have to understand what this code does. Just copy and paste it. But it is generating it's initializing the random number generator. After you've initialized the random number generator, you have to generate the number. And all you do to generate the number is you say rand, you call a function named rand, and you say %21, that's a module. Because you want it to be between 0 and 21, you use 21 hard-coded. You can store that random number in an integer, and that's the number you're going to compare against to exit the loop, whether or not they guessed correctly. It's also going to be the number that you compare against to determine whether or not you print too low or too high. So this should be a lot of fun. Again, a lot of concepts you're going to be exposed to. If statements, looping constructs, the break statement, inner and outer loops, nested loops, a lot of nice stuff. So good luck, have fun, and I'll provide a solution in the next lecture. Thank you.